Welcome to the show, Around the Nation, right here, 2AT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Friday afternoon, TGIF. Thank goodness. We're coming to the end of another week. Got a great bunch of stories for you guys today. So we'll have a lot of fun, including Donald Trump's epic self-ode on Hannity. Hilarious. Then we, of course, have Meghan McCain saying ridiculous things. And about how Democrats need to go, not to the left, but, of course, to the right. And she gets busted by Sonny Hostin. That's fun. So we've got that couple of fun stories. Then we also have disastrous stories, including the $1.4 trillion war budget approved by the House. We also have Jeffrey Epstein, more details into some of the shady stuff that he did. And then, of course, we'll talk about the issue of Donald Trump's tax returns. And how his argument is basically trash. So we'll do all that stuff. We'll have some fun here on today's show. But before I get to that, I want to thank everybody for supporting the show. One way that you can do so, of course, is to like and share this stream. Also like and share the videos. That really, really helps. As, of course, the way that YouTube works is that if you guys, the audience, don't really watch a certain video, well, then pretty much nobody else watches it because it doesn't get out to, into any recommendations. And we're already getting crushed in recommendations as it is by corporate media. So it's really, really important that you guys watch the videos, watch the clips, and then share them out. Because, again, those algorithm changes, they do prevent us from getting out into everywhere else, out into the YouTube ecosystem, I guess, for non-subscribers to see the content and go, oh, hey, turns out I actually kind of like that guy. Let's go watch, the other stuff that he puts out. So very, very important, like and share. Okay. Other ways that you can support the show, of course, is through Patreon, patreon.com/2ATNation. For that, I want to thank Dwayne Godfrey, Jim Green, Ross Mullins, and Ethan Hattendorf. So thank you to those people who support us on Patreon, patreon.com/2ATNation. Okay. More stuff. Next week, we will be at Detroit. We will be taking place, taking part, I should say, of the Revolution Rally. And so, yeah, we'll be there the 30th and the 31st. So, no show those 2 days, Tuesday, Wednesday. But if you're in the area, if you're taking part of the Revolution Rally, then feel free to come say hi. Have a discussion, have a little fun, support progressive, policy, and should be a good time. All right. I think that's all on the announcements. So, all right, let's dive in. Let's start out with Donald Trump's tax returns. Okay. President Trump does not want members of Congress to look at his tax returns. I mean, we know that for certain because ever since he became president, and even beforehand, he wanted to make sure that nobody saw his tax returns, saying ridiculous things like, oh, no, I've been under audit for the last 3-4 years, something like that. Man, under audit, you can't look at it. I'd love to show you, but I just can't. I'm under audit. What are you going to do? You're just going to have to take my word for it that my tax returns are fantastic and tremendous. That is one hell of an audit, by the way. 4 years. Now, the other reason for avoiding tax disclosure law is that he claims that, well, it's the Democrats. They're asking for my taxes. Nobody's ever done that before. That is unprecedented in American history, that you will try to get a president's tax returns. I mean, that's crazy. We've never seen it. Turns out, no, that's not true at all. Democrats in the House of Representatives have actually released historical documents. I know, you would have to read them, and we know Donald Trump doesn't read. But these historical documents show that there is a precedent for releasing tax returns for presidents. Now, what do we call something that's not true? Well, I mean, you can call it false, right? Or you can call it a lie. It's the same thing, right? So what Donald Trump says, it's unprecedented. It is false. Therefore, he is lying. Of course. Now, let me give you the historical context here, right? So, in the early 1970s, the Joint Committee on Taxation used the same tax disclosure law to obtain information related to then President Richard Nixon. Now, Richard Nixon shares a lot of similarities to Donald Trump. Even so, even Tricky Dick had a notable difference to Donald Trump. You see, amid a controversy over questionable deductions, according to HuffPost, he'd used to lower his tax bill. In 1973, Richard Nixon publicly asked the Joint Committee, which is a nonpartisan panel of tax policy experts, to pour over 4 years of his returns to verify that he indeed paid what he owed. Because I guess even back then, you might be a criminal, you might be a terrible person, but at least if you're a Republican, you believed in paying your taxes. Richard Nixon actually cared more about that than Donald Trump does. So now Nixon said, okay, you want to look at my taxes? Go ahead. Go ahead. Now, the difference is, of course, Donald Trump says, no, you don't need to look at my taxes. No, you stay away from that, from my taxes. If you try to even look at them, it's unprecedented. You're just going to have to take my word for it. They're the best tax returns ever. Now, of course, that wasn't enough for congressional investigators, and good thing, too, right? So they pushed for more documentation, more taxes, right? Now, the House Ways and Means Committee on Thursday revealed old letters between the between the Joint Committee on Taxation and the Internal Revenue Service. And it showed that the Joint Tax Committee had asked for more information on Nixon, including for returns prior to the ones that Nixon had volunteered. The IRS provided those returns the same day. Oh, you need those returns? Sure thing. Got them right here. Here you go. Now, this is Committee Chair Richard Neal, right? Now, he had a statement on this, right? After they dug up these old documents and said, hey, look, it turns out we do have a precedent. He said this in a statement, quote, these included tax years prior to those released by President Nixon, as well as the return for family members. It is noted that in the materials that these returns were necessary because they related to later tax years. This is precisely why we requested returns prior to 2017 for President Trump. Now, Ways and Means, the Joint Committee on Taxation, and the Senate Finance Committee are the three congressional committees that are supposed to be able to look at any tax return that they want, including the president's. Congress itself, has the power and gave itself the power back in 1924. Now, the reason, of course, is they wanted to make sure that they had a check on the executive branch. And so any of those committees, in order to get access to these taxes, all they have to do is say, we would like access to these taxes. And the IRS is supposed to say, okay, yep, that is part of your power and your check on the executive branch. Now, the problem is we have an IRS that will not do that. Now, earlier this year, Neal had asked for copies of 6 years' worth of Donald Trump's personal and business tax returns, plus documents related to any audits for those years. But Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who oversees the IRS and is a Trump lackey, said that complying with this so-called unprecedented request could have terrible consequences. Terrible. Oh, really? Well, I guess maybe if you're somebody whose name happens to rhyme with Tronald Dump, I don't know. Somebody, sees some possible terrible consequences. Come on, we all know why. We know. History demonstrates that private tax return information, this is Mnuchin talking here, is susceptible to abuse for partisan purposes regardless of which party is in power. Now, that is severe projection because, look, if there were any sort of questions about a Democratic president having some, straight up weird shenanigans in their tax returns, who do you think would be calling for those immediately? Republicans in Congress. Now, Mnuchin said that in an April 23rd letter, and he also said, unless carefully restrained by law, this risk threatens the privacy of all taxpayers. Again, this is precedent. Since the 1920s, Congress has been able to ask for tax returns so that they can go and review and make sure that, of course, whoever's, taxes are being audited, et cetera, or looked at, is complying with federal tax law. But see, here's the thing. Again, Mnuchin is there strictly to cover for Donald Trump. And so he knows that, look, Donald Trump doesn't want us to look at his taxes. I think there might be a reason why. So we're just going to stall, and we're going to make sure that the president does not get any sort of check from Congress. And so here's the thing as well. What is in those taxes that is stopping Donald Trump from being able to share it? Well, again, we don't know, but we could definitely speculate. And to do that, let's go and get some historical context again from Richard Nixon. Now, the committee reported that Nixon had used bogus deductions to reduce his taxable income, ultimately dodging about $477,431 worth of taxes, according to the Joint Committee's recent summary of the episode. The IRS had conducted a parallel review, and Nixon wound up paying money that he owed into the federal government. So the reason that I reference that is that Nixon used some deductions to reduce his taxable income, of course, right? And ended up paying a lot of money. Again, this was back in the 1960s. $477,000 is, a large amount of money. So now we go to Donald Trump. Now, here's the thing. Is Donald Trump does he enjoy dodging taxes? Yes, he actually does. In recent leaked tax filings, Donald Trump has been accused of inflating his assets in order to get loans from Deutsche Bank. And then, afterwards, had deflated his assets in order to avoid paying extra tax on that money. Now, I'm no tax expert, but that looks like fraud. Oh, no, my company's worth a lot of money. That's why you should give me a loan, because I have a lot of assets to be able to pay it back. But then when it comes time to, pay your taxes, oh, no, oh, God, I look at my assets. They're so terrible. It looks like I'm just going to have to pay so much less because my assets are terrible. Oh, which one isn't? Are you a brilliant businessman? Makes lots and lots of money and therefore, of course, owes proportional taxes to his wealth? Or do you suck at business and therefore need to have people pity on you at the IRS? Oh, please don't tax me so much. What is it? Well, again, speculation, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer. He's all in for saving as much money as possible. And of course, Republicans look at that and say, well, of course. That's why Donald Trump's an absolute genius. He lies to the federal government and he withholds, money that could go to the common good. Well, of course, wouldn't you do that? I mean, I'd do that because I hate paying taxes. And I want to make sure to starve the government of revenue that they need. I'm a great businessman. If Congress is able to look at Trump's taxes, I think at the very least they would find evidence of tax fraud. And that's the overall thing, right? And if you think Donald Trump wouldn't do it, again, no. He absolutely would do it. And if you say, oh, no, Donald Trump would never do anything like tax fraud, to make sure that he pays less than what he owes and saves money. Well, if you're saying that, then you don't know Donald Trump. I mean, again, he's incredibly cheap because he's not a billionaire. Not a billionaire. And those returns, here's another thing. Those returns would likely prove that he is not as rich as he claims. I'm also guessing that he has a lot of debt. Because again, you have to look at some of the leaked taxes that we've already seen. And, that leak had about 10 years worth of Trump's tax returns. And he lost $10 billion. This guy is a serial loser. An absolute fraud of a businessman, and just absolutely terrible at anything related to finance. He also has a history of taking out junk loans with super high interest rates, and then, of course, declaring bankruptcy when it all blows up in his face. All of these reasons, and possibly more, are why he continues to lie and have Mnuchin, his crony, his stooge, continue to cover up his tax returns. But as you can see, there is precedent for Congress asking for tax returns. They have the power to do so, and they have the right to do so. And so his excuse is, they just can't, and it's unprecedented, and I'm being audited, are complete and utter BS. Mnuchin, do your job. Give us the tax returns. Okay.
It's, I think there's a whole new day starting. I think, I used to use, and I still use, drain the swamp. We have some very, very bad people in government that would be willing to do very bad things and for bad reasons.
So that was President Donald Trump on Sean Hannity, having basically doing a hilarious self-own. So now, he was talking about, of course, the Mueller investigation. There are people in government. They're doing bad things. They're doing bad things against me for bad reasons, right? That kind of sounds like someone I know. Someone who was president of the United States. Now, this irony did not go unaddressed on social media. And I want to give you some of these tweets, which are awesome. Pete Souza says, finally, he speaks the truth about himself. Daniel Dale says, the president, we have some very bad people in government that would be willing to do bad things for very bad reasons. And that's, of course, his exact quote. And yeah, he's not wrong at all. He's just explained himself. Dan Shapiro says, finally, some self-awareness. Will Bunch said, occasionally Trump stumbles into a true thing. Cruel Angel's dissertation says, to be fair, he's not wrong. He's not wrong for once. Bin Raccoon says, projection still working. Kelly Burke said, projection extraordinaire. And of course, Paul W.E. says, king of projection. I think we got the memo here. Now, here's the thing. This comes after basically Trump railing against the Mueller investigation. Now, watching a lot of that interview, Trump continued to talk about performance, right? He performed very poorly. Robert Mueller did. Performed very poorly. And all the pundits and everybody was talking about it, and we've never seen anything like this before. Well, okay, so you're talking about performance, right? What is this, a TV show? Well, when it comes to Donald Trump, it is. Everything is like a TV show. Everything has to do with ratings. Everything has to do with appearance. And look, if you looked at that, and if that's the only thing that you looked at during the entire Mueller hearings, you'd be like, oh man, Mueller, sure, he was off his game, boy. Stumbling and saying, oh, I didn't read this, I didn't know what this was. But remember, the Justice Department said you can only talk strictly about the report. You can't speculate on anything else. You can't talk about anything else. There are other investigations that are going on. So here's your guidelines. So a lot of what the Republicans did is they set up a lot of, I wouldn't say traps, but they did set up a lot of barriers, right, of things that Mueller couldn't talk about. And so that's part of that. And the other part was the absolute outlandish claims made by a lot of these Republicans. Jim Jordan, of course, one of them, Louis Gohmert. I mean, it was just the normal cast of characters from this clown show of the Republican Party that were bringing up ridiculous conspiracy theories. And so when you talk about bad people in government doing bad things for bad reasons, it's not just Donald Trump, it's also the people who enable him. And so, again, you've got these congressmen that did not address obstruction at all, because that's what this was about. The report said we couldn't find evidence of criminal conspiracy. Now, they didn't mention collusion. They didn't talk about that at all in the report. They said we don't have enough evidence to prove a criminal conspiracy, but we do have a lot of evidence of obstruction of justice. And did the people talk about that at all? Democrats did. They focused on that, and that was good. But Republicans did not. And all Trump could focus on is, well, I mean, it's a witch hunt, bad people, and by the way, Robert Mueller, bad performance. Ridiculous. But hey, that's all that Donald Trump cares about is appearances, and by all appearances to him, he won. It's time that we show him that he didn't win. It's time that we get the Democrats to actually do their job and impeach President Trump. He is a criminal, and Nancy Pelosi, do your job and hold this criminal accountable. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I am going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got the war budget and then more stories, including Meghan McCain. So come right back right after this break, and we'll have more stories. We'll see you in a couple minutes. Round the nation. back to the show. Run the Nation right here, TBT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. So we've got some comments here from you guys. I'm going to read some of those. First, we got Jenna Mullet 77 who says Trump's preschool called. They want their gold star back. Plus, he owes back lunch money. No surprise. That's fun. Then a member comment from Sarge Tech actually asking a question here. What about the felon shoplifter Danielle Stella, who was to run against Ilhan Omar in 2020? So it's a funny question. I saw that and I was like, ridiculous. For one, you just mentioned one of the big things. She's a literal criminal. The other thing, of course, is I believe she's a QAnon conspiracy theorist. And so there's all sorts of crazy packed into that one package. She does not have a chance. And then there's other talk. Apparently, I haven't heard this, but you guys have that the MyPillow guy will be running against Omar in 2020 as well. Oh, the clown car. Hilarious. This continues to start filling up. Great. Now, another comment here that I wanted to talk about is comes from Clyde Boyce, who talks about Nancy Pelosi. He says, Pelosi's just being strategic, but I do wish she would start impeachment proceedings already. So, okay, well, here's the thing, right? So, are you right that she is being strategic? I guess in her own way, yeah. I mean, I'm sure if you ask her, she's like, oh, no, we got a strategy. Of what? Oh, he's going to self-impeach. What does that mean? Again, she thinks that this is 1998, that we're dealing with the same kind of situation that we had with Bill Clinton. Now, traditional pundits and all that, they look at the Bill Clinton debacle and they're like, oh, God, no, impeachment bad. Impeachment bad. You can't do any impeachment. It doesn't matter what happened. Can't do it. Why? Because we're going to lose in the polls. Because look at what happened with the Republicans and Bill Clinton. Well, for one, Bill Clinton was a popular president at the time. And not only that, but he didn't really... He lied to Congress? Yes, he did. He lied about having an extramarital affair. Ooh, nobody really cared about that. But yes, okay, he lied to Congress. And that is an impeachable offense. Donald Trump has lied 1 billion times to Congress, it seems like, and has lied to the American people, and has also done obstruction of justice, has also broken the Emoluments Clause, has also paid people off or instructed other people to pay off one Playboy model, Karen McDougal, and also Stormy Daniels. I mean, that's a crime as well. It's a campaign finance violation. So you have all of this, all of these crimes that Donald Trump has actually already done. And the fact that he is dangerous, and the Democrats spare no expense at trying to point out how dangerous Donald Trump is. And yet Nancy Pelosi thinks it's her best interest to not do anything about it. They're going to use this, mark my words, they are running in 2020 with the message, Trump is bad. And let me guess, I almost guarantee that she's thinking, well, look, if Joe Biden wins the nomination, which we hope, or Joe Biden or Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris, whatever, if an establishment candidate wins, then we're going to run with the message, vote for this person because Trump is bad. That's the Democrats' message. Not, hey, look, we can do better with policy. We have great policies that will help you, help your family, et cetera, et cetera. No, they're going to run with Trump bad, vote for Democrats. But didn't we already do that in 2016? Yes, we did. We did that with Hillary Clinton. Now, look, I'm not saying that anybody else has the baggage of Hillary Clinton other than Joe Biden. Joe Biden's got his own amount of horrible, even in some points, racist, baggage that he is carrying around. And that is a significant problem. So maybe her strategy is protect Joe Biden. If he gets the nomination, then we're going to protect him by pointing out how bad Donald Trump is. But again, you risk another retread of 2016 and ending up with the same result despite Donald Trump being one of the most unpopular presidents in history. I mean, it's a disastrous strategy. But you can't say that she doesn't have strategy. It's just bad. It's bad. And this is coming from a guy who, once again, pointed out back in 2015, leading up to the election, if you nominate someone like Hillary Clinton, an establishment candidate, you will have Donald Trump. What happened? We have Donald Trump. So bad strategy. I'm calling it right now. That's what they're trying to do. That's why she doesn't want... And of course, the other part, of course, which is very obvious, is that she raises a lot of money off Donald Trump. And so that can also be discounted as part of her motivations for keeping her current strategy of letting Trump self-impeach. Ridiculous. It's going to be a disaster. Okay, anyway. So there's that. Moving on. Let's go to the war budget. Now, there's a lot of people that like to say that Republicans and Democrats are worlds apart, like oil and water, right? And look, if you talk about social issues, then you would be largely correct. But when it comes to issues like war, well, they seem to be all in agreement, at least most of them. And their agreement is, let's give more and more money to the military-industrial complex. Now, by proof of this is a recent bipartisan deal in which 219 House Democrats and 65 Republicans joined to pass a budget agreement that includes $1.4 trillion in military spending over the next 2 years. Now, that's just over $700 billion a year and of course, when you pair it with the no limit on how much we can borrow, since the debt ceiling has been suspended, that means Republicans with Democratic help just told the Pentagon, go nuts, have fun. Now, of course, there was opposition to this. That opposition included members of the Squad and some progressive Democrats, Representative Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, along with 13 other Democrats. They voted against a 2-year, $2.7 trillion budget agreement. Now, you also had 132 Republicans. Of course, they mainly objected due to budgetary reasons, as well as Justin Amash. Now, what's interesting about this, right? Republicans are like, oh my God, how dare we pass this $2.7 trillion budget agreement with the Democrats? Well, we can't do that. That's spending too much on the domestic side. Their entire argument is, oh no, let's give money to the military, but we're spending too much on domestic issues. So let's understand that. That's why you had 132 Republicans saying, no way to this deal. Because most of them, again, do not want to increase spending on the domestic side, but are more than happy to pump more money into the military. So there were a couple of controversial votes here, and that included some in the Progressive Caucus, particularly caucus co-chairs Pramila Jayapal and Mark Pocan. They both voted yes for this. Now, they have a reason, and a lot of that had to do with the domestic side. In fact, Jayapal and Pocan said in a statement, quote, "It's not a perfect deal by any means. This deal does not address the bloated Pentagon budget, which you just empowered, but it does begin to close the gap in funding for families by allocating more new non-defense spending than defense spending in the first time in many years." Now, is that true? Well, we'll break that down. But first, look, I like a lot of Jayapal's votes. Let's be honest, she is Justice Democrat, but that doesn't mean that this was not a terrible vote for a terrible budget. Just because I like a lot of what she said, that doesn't mean that I can't criticize votes that I disagree with. And in this case, I massively dislike this vote because, again, it gives more money to the bloated war budget. which we do not need here in America. This was a bad, bad vote. But again, part of this also means kneecapping progressive priorities later on, because this agreement lifted the debt limit for Donald Trump, but would reimpose it on a possible Democratic president. So now, of course, that debt limit is how much money we can borrow. That's after we spend it. In order to raise that debt limit, we would have to get together with Republicans or have a massive supermajority, which doesn't seem very likely, as Republicans are expected to hold the Senate in 2020. So Republican Senate with a Democratic president means, and a debt limit fight, that means no progressive priorities are getting passed. That means no Medicare for all. That means no free college. That means, no $15 minimum wage. Everything's going to be shut down by McConnell. And then you also have that debt limit where, somebody like Senator Ted Cruz is going to say, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to raise this debt limit and allow you to pay the bills that we've already racked up unless you completely drop every single progressive priority. We will plunge this country, nay, the world, into financial crisis if you dare try to do any sort of progressive priority that you campaigned on. This was a terrible deal. Terrible, disastrous. Now, it has, of course, a lot of critics. I'm going to read some quotes from them right here, starting out with Stephen Miles. Now, he's executive director of Win Without War, and he took to Twitter, and he said this, quote, "You're no doubt hearing a lot of crowing from Democrats about how the deal they struck with Trump gives more money to non-defense spending than to defense spending. Let's be clear that by every measure, save the one that they're using, that is simply not true. Under this deal, the Pentagon and its affiliated programs will get $1.48 trillion over the next 2 years. The entire rest of the government, including the VA, by the way, will get $1.3 trillion. That is a $178.6 billion difference between the Pentagon spending and the whole rest of the government, which means the Pentagon actually does get more money than the rest of the entire government combined. We give more to the military than the rest of everything else. That's insanity. The rest of the government, by the way, is schools, healthcare, science, infrastructure. Everything else the government does. Help for needy people, for SNAP. All of that is dwarfed by the insane military budget. And you know what's even more of a disaster, right? So we have all this money, but we still don't seem to have enough to take care of our troops when they come home from disastrous wars for profit. Instead of funding any of that stuff, we spend more money on corporate-sponsored military adventurism. Complete and utter insanity. Now, another critic here, this is William Harding, director of the Arms and Security Project at the Center for International Policy. Now, he wrote an article in Forbes, which is not exactly a liberal rag, okay? And he said that the budget deal, quote, vastly overpays for the Pentagon. Quote, at $738 billion for fiscal year 2020 and $740 billion for fiscal year 2021, this agreement sets the table for two of the highest budgets for the Pentagon and related work on nuclear warheads, the Department of Energy, since World War II. Now, again, that second thing should, the first part is disastrous enough, but you have the second. Now we're spending more money on nuclear weapons, when in reality, the entire world needs to denuclearize. Nobody needs a nuclear weapon. Nobody. It causes untold devastation to not only people, but our environment as well. These weapons are bad news, and I shouldn't have to tell you that. We don't need this, and we shouldn't be spending more money on this. We should be spending money trying to continue to spread nuclear, basically non-proliferation. Or at least we would in a just world. Now, he also said this, the proposed figures are higher than spending at the height of the Vietnam and Korean Wars, and substantially more than the high point of the Reagan buildup in the 1980s. And the fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021 numbers are only slightly less than spending in 2010, when the United States had 180,000 troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, roughly 9 times the number currently deployed. Meaning, we do not have as many troops deployed in as many different places, and we're not in the middle of wars, but at the same time, we're spending more money or almost as much money as we did when we were in 2 different active wars. Look, if I didn't know better, right, I would say that having this much spending in the military could be considered a buildup. And actually, I do know better, because that's exactly what it seems. Okay. Now, look, could it be that, of course, Donald Trump just wants to boast about throwing all of our money at the military, and getting tanks and planes and stuff because he's a child? Yeah, there could be. I mean, again, Donald Trump is a child. He just wants military parades because, I don't know, he likes to pretend that he's some sort of war hero or something, despite having bone spurs. Or, could be that while Donald Trump's over here acting like a child, there are people in his administration that are planning something. Again, we have somebody who is surrounded by neocons. These are the same people that perpetrated the Iraq War. And we have a very compliant press that is actually very pro-war. And so they take every opportunity to try to beat the drums of war. And then add in that we have a Iran deal that was basically ripped up. And Iran, of course, that is very angry about that. The sanctions being reimposed. And then we have, stuff going on in the Strait of Hormuz. And all that. And then, of course, you have Israel that cannot wait for us to launch an attack on Iran. Saudi Arabia as well. All that, I mean, look, this is a big problem. I'm just very worried that all of these factors together, it might only take one thing that could lead to another disastrous war in the Middle East, whether or not Donald Trump wants it. And I'm not even convinced that he does, because, again, he's too stupid. But there are people that do want it, and they are currently in this administration, and they continue to whisper into Donald Trump's ear. These are the ones that continue to say, we need more military spending, we need more military spending, and that's exactly what we're doing. And where the Democrats are supposed to be the check on the president, the so-called resistance, instead they have become, save for a few, like members of the squad, the assistants. These are scary, scary times. I hope I'm wrong about this. I hope that I'm just, over speculating. But when you see more and more money get pumped into a military, when you don't need it, it tends to worry me. And it should worry everyone. Okay.
It still is like a clown car of candidates, like 22, 24, depending on which
How many
which
did
day
the
it is.
Republicans have when they were fighting?
17, I believe.
So it's up there.
And it can have the same impact. And I will say that, look, I understand Democrats are looking for who's going to be the strongest. I'm looking for what crazy crap Marianne Williamson's going to say. I'm looking forward to seeing what crazy radical stuff. If you're going to raise your hand and say that all illegal immigrants should have health care when they come into this country, right now it's who can be the most far left on this stage, which is great for a primary. It's great when you're trying to win over Democrats. But when you get to a general, it's also who's going to be able to hedge and win over all the Trump voters who voted for Trump after they voted for President Obama.
So that was Meghan McCain basically making the argument that, oh, no, you're too far left. Democrats, you need to run to the right to try to get Trump voters. Now, where do I begin? I mean, there's so much there that is absolutely ridiculous. I guess we'll start with this question. Does anybody ever tell Republicans that during a general election, they need to run to meet Democrats? Does anybody ever tell Republicans that? Oh, no, you understand. You've got to pull it back because you need to appeal to the Democrats. No, they never, ever say that. I mean, I've never heard that before. Now, oddly enough, we do see some examples. So let me give you some of that. For example, every time Republicans run, they talk about saving Social Security and saving Medicare. Oh, no, we believe in Social Security. We believe in Medicare. All this stuff. Don't worry, seniors. We're going to take care of you. Now, in reality, of course, they do everything they can to undermine those programs so they can later on cut them. Or even better yet, force Democrats to cut them in order to continue to make them fiscally stable, right? Now, Donald Trump himself, if you can remember, he even praised universal single-payer healthcare when he said Australia had a better healthcare system than we do. Australia has a single-payer system, literally called Medicare. You know why they do that, by the way? It's because it turns out progressive policy is incredibly popular with Americans. Now, if you divorce any of these policies from the party itself, right? Because when you do polling and you say, X politician is for this policy, well, then support for that policy drops among the other members of the other party, right? But when you say, hey, this is the policy, do you agree with this policy? Generally, like for example, on healthcare, generally even Republicans are like, oh yeah, we like single payer. Yeah, sure. That sounds like a good system. So, okay. Now, let me go back to the example for Medicare for All, right? So Medicare for All, when it first came out, or people started talking about it back in 2016, it had over 70% support from the American public. Now, that was before it was brought down by relentless partisan attacks by both Fox News and MSNBC. Again, you have people out on MSNBC right there talking about how terrible Medicare for All is. Lean forward. Yeah, no, they're leaning forward into a pool of cash from health insurance executives and corporations. That's what they're doing. But no, even after all those attacks, you still have 56% of Americans that are in favor of a government-sponsored health insurance plan. And again, if you divorce that from partisan, identity, whatever, instead of saying Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez supports a, Medicare for all single-payer system, and you just say this is what it is, it's a government-sponsored healthcare plan that offers this, and this, and this, and this. Generally, more Americans are in favor of that because they actually like good policy. So now she wants to talk about radical, right? Forget the Marianne Williamson thing, right? But she says, no, they're going to talk about radical things. No, you know what's radical? Cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid to the tune of trillions of dollars, as the Republican budget had proposed. You know what's radical? Cutting food assistance for millions of Americans in need. That's radical. What's radical? Giving tax cuts, trillions of dollars in tax cuts to the rich and giant multinational corporations while wages remain stagnant. You know what else is radical? Not doing anything about climate change. Even Republicans, even Frank Luntz, Republican spinster, the guy who came up with death tax and all this, basically phraseology that the Republicans use to push back against progressive policy proposals. Even this guy's like, we do actually need to do something about climate change. And you know what happened? His house burned down in a wildfire. Hey, man, look, if it's a Republican, if it happens to a Republican, if it happens to me, then we got to do something about it. If it happens to you, I don't really care. But, hey, at least he's on the, I guess, sort of right side on this one. For at least acknowledging that climate change is a real problem and saying that we actually got to do something about it. But even with all that, still, you got people on cable news saying, oh, no, we've got to run to the right. You can't win as a leftist despite having incredibly popular ideas because leftism is just not mainstream in this country. No, this is a double standard, and it's also false, by the way. That drives me absolutely insane. Democrats should not be running to the right. They shouldn't be running to embrace the right wing. No, they should not only be representing their base, of course, but also the vast majority of Americans who actually agree with progressive policy. Now, that leads me to these statements by Sunny Hostin, who is also a View co-host. Here's what she said about McCain's comments.
I actually think if you look at the estimates by the U.S. Elections Project, 43% of eligible voters didn't even bother filling out a ballot in 2016.
So they're not
that
voters.
means 100 million people who have the legal right to vote just decided it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
That 100 million people, those 100 million people need to show up. So we need a candidate that are going to energize those people to walk out of their doors and walk into the ballot box and vote.
Well,
that's
this
what
is
we
why
need. Who cares about the Trump voters?
This-
If you still support this president after his racism, after putting kids in cages,
Then
after
you're never
everything
gonna
he's done,
change.
you're not going to
That's
change.
true.
You're foregone.
That's
I don't
true.
care about you.
But
I
there
care
are-
about the
but there
100
are-
million people.
there are
I'm pretty sure a few Trump supporters' heads just exploded. Oh my God, how dare you say that you shouldn't care about me? How dare you not care about me and my my economic anxiety? Now, again, studies have shown that the common driver among many Trump voters, now I'm not saying all of them, but many Trump voters, wasn't economic anxiety. It was racial anxiety. It was racial resentment. A lot of these people are doing fine economically, but they're afraid of darky moving in next to them in their neighborhood or seeing signs in Spanish. Nothing freaks out one of those hardcore Trump supporters than seeing a sign in Spanish. If you're an American, you speak American. I don't care about those people. And so I agree with Sunny Hostin. She's right that we shouldn't. Democrats should not care about those people. Now, if you're talking about, of course, some of the small minority of people who were brick throwers, and I've talked about them before, who actually did have economic concerns, or at least had concerns that, the establishment was screwing them over. And again, there are a few of them, right? And they were worried about bad trade deals. Things like Hillary Clinton supported TPP until she didn't support TPP. Wealth and income inequality. Now, those people have long abandoned Trump because he has shown himself to be another member of the 1% who doesn't care about anyone but himself. Those are the voters you can reach, and you don't reach them by going to the right wing. You reach them by doing good economic progressive policy, like the ones espoused by the Squad and by Senator Bernie Sanders. He is one person that can reach those people who are struggling, who don't have the baggage of racism and xenophobia that most, if not all, current Trump supporters now embrace. The solution isn't to go right, it's to go left, where the rest of the people are. Okay. Okay. Let's do one more story real quick here. Let's give you an update on Jeffrey Epstein. Accused sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, let me start that again. Now, there's been more information that has come out about accused sex trafficker and billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. So now this is being reported by the New York Times about a lot of his shady things that he did in the past. Now, one of these stories comes from a California model who just recently accused him as pretending to be a talent scout in order to grope women. I mean, this is a gross person. All right, so let's get to the claims here. Now, in an interview with the New York Times, Alicia Arden, who was a model, claimed that she was attacked in 1997 when she was 27 by Epstein. She said that she was introduced to a man who identified himself as a talent scout for Victoria's Secret. He then invited her to a Santa Monica hotel room to audition for a spot in the company catalog. That man was Jeffrey Epstein. And as soon as, of course, she was in this hotel room with him, he assaulted her, allegedly. He apparently grabbed her, tried to undress her, and said he wanted to, quote, manhandle her. Now, in response, of course, during the interview, she said, quote, his weapons were his hands. And now that's disastrous. I mean, this is a person, and I would disagree that his weapons were his hands. His weapons were not just his hands, but his massive wealth and influence. The same kind of wealth and influence that got him a deal where he only had to spend 8 hours in prison a week. Or, I'm sorry, a day. He would be out for 16 hours a day doing whatever he wants. He would go back to prison to sleep, and he would do this 6 times a day. What kind of sweetheart deal is that? But that's what you get when you have enormous wealth and privilege. And that's what allowed him to impersonate a Victoria's Secret, a person who worked for that company. Now, the report noted that 2 executives were notified that Epstein was posing as a scout for the lingerie and clothing brand when speaking to young women, and promptly alerted CEO Wexner, this is Leslie Wexner, who reportedly told Epstein to stop. Oh, hey, you're pretending to be one of our talent scouts in order to grope women? Yeah, you might want to stop that. But she did nothing else. Nothing. So that was it. They maintained the financial relationship even after that incident. Now, if that were me, gone, fired. You abused our trust, you abused our privilege, you tried to pose and pass yourself off as an employee, as a scout for us. You're a terrible, sick, horrible person. Gone, in an instant. But no, in this case, money and having a relationship with somebody who was very, very wealthy and very, very powerful and influential was more than enough for you to overlook manhandling your models. I mean, that's horrifying. Now, asked about the incident, a spokeswoman, a person for L Brands, home to both Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works, said, well, Mr. Epstein served as Mr. Wexner's personal money manager for a period that ended nearly 12 years ago. We do not believe he was ever employed by nor served as an authorized representative of the company. No, he didn't, but he passed himself off. And even afterwards, Wexner still had a relationship, still allowed him to be close. And this is, again, what money and power and privilege buys you in America, the ability to do whatever you want, to whomever you want, and to victimize whoever you want. That is gross. Absolutely gross. So, look, this is just one of the things that has just come out. There's going to be more. A lot of information. Look, Epstein holds a lot of information about a lot of very powerful and influential people. And so I'm looking forward to him surviving, hopefully prison, to where he can actually go and reveal the multitudes of people that he worked with and that he had done these kinds of things with, or at least with their knowledge. A lot of powerful and important people do not want that information to come out. And so that is one good... Again, I have no love for Epstein or for what he did, obviously. But they need to protect him to make sure that he can give and dish all this information so we can take down some more truly terrible people. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Thank you. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like and share our videos later on as well. Or you can support, or I should say, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. Thank you, guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.